This time we're going to talk about the challenges and new directions for cross-cultural research. Woo! I know it's been so long since you've seen me. Just ages. I'm just checking to see if there's any cat nonsense. Not now. Anyway. So let's talk about the challenges and new directions for cross-cultural research. The biggest one is ethnocentrism. It's this idea that judging another culture from is essentially that you're judging another culture from a view of one's own. And I get that that's we are locked into our culture for the most part, so I get it. Like, for me to, I wouldn't have to just do bicultural research, but it can be harder, for sure. And if you don't think about how your own perspective can influence your observations, then you're going to challenge. So observers need to understand both the culture and the assumptions it includes to understand behaviors of people within this culture. And that's hard. That's really hard. It tends to lead to exaggeration and overemphasis of cultural differences. Often this is based on assuming that all individuals of a culture are alike. So I would get assumed to be individualistic. And just because I'm an American. So, and obviously, there's lots of differences within group that get lost when you do work like this. And that's why I'm very dubious. And there's also this minor problem that I think is more of an issue with interpretation. So we have to use really large sample sizes because the effects are small. So, as a consequence, people just assume that because it's significant, it's meaningful. But in fact, it's a small effect. I don't really view this as a problem with the design or the study because you need big samples to detect small effects. And you can also use big samples to detect small effects or big effects. So big sample can be used for all of them. So as long as you're calculating an effect to see what the magnitude is and not just saying, oh, these groups are significantly different, then it's fine. I think it's people interpretation, not the statistics, which should not surprise you at all, because I'm me. Okay, so outgroup homogeneity bias is also a big thing. So the general tendency is to see members of groups to which you don't belong as similar, both just similar within that group, as well as groups that are similar to each other. So essentially it's like a my group, not my group, and then everyone not my group is all the same. That's the logic. Okay. So, culture and values. So, cultural relativism, so while we look for universal values, we also have to try and strike the balance between being respectful of other cultures and judging them for having terrible practices. So cultural relativism is the idea that all cultural views of reality are equally valid. And this is where I kind of disagree. I don't interpret that to mean that cultures cannot be judged as good or bad. I think that you have to look at it within context, and that you have to at least accept that that is something they value. That doesn't mean that you can't judge them and make a value judgment. For example, female genital mutilation, bad. Okay? Bad, full stop. Even though it is a cultural practice in some areas, I'm going to go on a limb here and say it very controversially, it's bad. Don't cut don't cut your kids' genitals. Don't do it. Now you could argue circumcision. Circumcision's a little milder. But in both camps, my stance is no, get consent. Like, you need consent. And that tends to not be a thing. So that's my issue. Also, the level of mutilation is huge. Also ethnic cleansing. Bad. Don't do it. It's not good. I would like to, I see this actually in a lot of my, genetic genealogy side project. Everybody else has so many, third and fourth cousins. I don't. And it's because they were, quote, cleansed. So, that's a bummer. So, yeah, that also bad. And thirdly, terrorism. Obviously, this list is not exhaustive, but these three are pretty much, I'd argue, universally I'm going to make a value judgment. Genital mutilation, bad. Ethnic cleansing, bad. Terrorism, bad. I know, very controversial. So controversial. Sarcasm here. Okay, so yeah. This also makes the search for universal values especially important so that we can discourage some of these really universally horrified practices. I mean, there are some cultural things that differ, I get it, but not this one. Let's not kill people. Let's not mutilate them. Well, seems like a good rule. Yeah. So, but one advantage of finding universal cultural values is that's a way to communicate and express and frame some of these less desirable values. Okay, so also challenges. Subcultures and multiculturalism. So, it can be difficult to define a culture. Should it be based on language, geography, political boundaries, or something else? And honestly, definitions of cultural groups are super arbitrary. And important subgroups also exist within cultures. So, yeah, I imagine that a lot of recent refugees or families who came over and the travelers as well, those are important subgroups that are understudied. But yeah, okay, so also this last one here, people can belong to more than one culture and see the world and themselves, especially in terms of their personality, through more than one cultural lens. And so that's probably why my personality, probably one solid reason why my personality seems to be bouncy. Because I have multiple lenses. And so some bicultural people experience stress from trying to integrate all their cultures together to make one thing. And so bicultural identity integration is this continuum along which people with two cultural backgrounds differ to the extent to which they see themselves as member of one group versus the other group. And either see themselves as two different groups or members of a combined joint culture that integrates both aspects, or experiencing conflict and stress from having the two cultures together and being unsure about which they belong. We can see this in our current, you see this often with various bicultural identities and biracial people. Not always, but often if having to kind of harmonize those two parts of themselves. Now, while ethnically I'm more homogenous than not, probably one reason why My Big Fat Greek Wedding really spoke to me as a child is because it highlighted that you could balance both. That you could have those cultural pieces that you really valued, or those collectivist aspects that were important to you, as well as the individualistic aspects, and you could have it all. And yeah, so that's probably probably why that movie spoke to me. And I'm really glad it was made. Because then I can kind of use it in my class forever. So yeah, but the point is that bicultural identity can be challenging. It's not very well studied. There is some work actually right down the road at Duke. There's one wonderful researcher whose name I'm blanking on right now, who I interact with Twitter and is wonderful, who studies bicultural identity among Indian and so like Indians from India and how they integrate with like recent immigrant culture. Her work is badass. In any other semester, I would have had her come on as a guest speaker, but this semester not so much because COVID. But yeah, Mason, make sure to put in that video clip and put in her name. Because I'm blanking on it, I can see her face and picture, which is not helpful, I know. So yeah, okay, we are on the last slide, and then we are done with, well, not done, but we're done with this module. So new research has been emphasizing more greatly how people are psychologically similar, that differences in rule appropriateness might mask similar motivations. For example, like the expression of extroversion may just be expressed differently, but still have that universal like variation in levels. Because cultures can influence how people feel or cultures may actually influence how people want to feel versus how they actually feel. So Asians perhaps want to feel positive low arousal emotions, while European Americans want to feel positive high arousal emotions, but in reality they both report feeling about the same. The desire to please one's parents is pretty universal, but there are differences in parental expectations and what those expectations are, as well as the intensity of those expectations. And lastly, personal goals. These differ across culture in the sense that they don't differ across culture. My mouth and brain just disconnected, so ignore all that. So personal goals tend to be consistent across culture. I don't know why I said opposite of that. They tend to be consistent, and as we cover the personality processes next, after Freud, we'll talk about what those goals are. So yeah, that's it. Thanks for hanging in there in the weirdest semester ever. Hopefully, it gets easier. And thanks for hanging in there. I really appreciate it. So, bye-bye.